You know, December was a month of high highs and some low lows, couple reading slumps. Let's talk about it. I want to give a huge thank you to my top tier Wizard Master patrons. Thank you, Chris, Nico, Cody, Sharon, Patrick, Leslie, Doug, Mendelin, Wystitch, Twaney, Spyro, Reading Rainbow, Mike Mullman, and Aaron. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today, guys, we are closing out 2022 with my December reading wrap-up. It's been one heck of a ride this month, but before we get into that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as it does help the channel grow. Please check the description box down below for the link to the Wizardly Duo Discord, as well as links to all my social media, including information about my Patreon. And that said, we are going to jump right on into this because we have got a lot to talk about. And like I said, I kind of had a couple reading slumps, and people always kind of groan when they say, like, oh, you didn't have a reading slump, you've read a bunch of books. Well, a lot of the times I'm forcing myself through those books, which doesn't always end up for the best rating for the book, which is why next year I am definitely just limiting myself. Like, I'm trying to put a hard cap on the amount of books that I read per month, which is still a lot of books, but it's not the insane amount that I've been reading this year, because 210 books, 94,000 pages, it's been a bit hectic. But without any further ado, let's just jump right into December, because we got some books to talk about. So starting off, we're going to talk about the books that I don't physically own. These were either audio review copies, Kindle Unlimited books. Starting off, we've got Fred the Vampire Accountant, number 8, Posthumous Education. And I got to talk with Drew Hayes. It was a lot of fun. You can check that interview right up there in the cards. And one of the things that he told me in that interview is he thinks that he's starting to approach the end of Fred's stories, which makes me sad because, I mean, we're 8 books into the series, and it's always fantastic. It's always fun. We always get to explore a new aspect of Frederick Fletcher. And in this one, we just get to see him really kind of do something different. He's trying his best to grow as an individual and kind of step outside of his comfort zone by becoming a substitute college professor. He's kind of strong-armed into it, but it leads to a lot of interesting kind of stories, because if you don't know anything about Fred the Vampire Accountant, they're all kind of episodic adventures set within a specific time frame. Now, in this point, I think it's like 3 to 6 months. Maybe closer to 3 months, but we do these like 4 or 5 episodes within that time period, and then we kind of just do. It's not a straightforward narrative. It's very interesting, but as a narrative, it does work. I love what Drew Hayes has done with the Fred the Vampire Accountant, and I'm hoping we've got like at least 3 or 4 more in the tank, because chef's kiss, 5 stars, starting off the month strong, fantastic palate cleanser. I can always look forward to a Fred book to just clean the palate. Don't know why I did that. I sincerely apologize. Next up, we've got A Shade of Madness, Ashes of Averin, Book 2 by Tiago Abdallah. And guys, Tiago is a master storyteller. He's really ramping up the stakes here in the Shade of Madness. I was provided the e-arc for this one. I don't think it comes out until about mid-January. I could be wrong on that one, but for fans of A Touch of Light, you are in for one heck of a ride. The stakes are much higher. We get a new POV in this story, and he's done something that I've never quite seen before. And what that something is he's written a character in a way that you can kind of, it bleeds through the page that some character growth is going on. Like, it's not even anything that they're necessarily saying, although it is there. The characters are shifting in really interesting ways that I'm falling in love with. So I gave this one, I believe, a 5 out of 5. It was so good. It was pulse pounding. It was full of really hard hitting moments, twists, turns, betrayals, politics, just battle and stakes and blah! Like, that's kind of how I can just describe A Shade of Madness. It was awesome. We've then got Conspiracy War Hype Book 1. This was kindly provided to me as a review copy on audio by AC Cobble, the author. I have since backed the Kickstarter for both Book 1 and 2 because, boy, I am just so in love with this. Fans of Ryan Cahill's Bound and the Broken are going to find something to love here. It's written in that just super accessible fantasy just style that Ryan has kind of mastered. But also, like, AC Cobble brings something awesome here. He takes the classic epic fantasy kind of tropes and then just makes them a little bit more interesting. One of the best ways I can kind of talk about this is, like, imagine the prose and the accessibility of, like, Ryan Cahill's Bound and the Broken, and then imagine The Great Coats by Sebastian Bates Castell and just smash that together. But instead of kind of dealing with the king being dead for 5 years like it is in The Great Coats, the king just died, and there is no heir. Hair? I've always got this wrong. Heir. It's heir. I don't know why I do this. English is a weird language. Heir sounds like air. You know, you pictured it in your brain. I know you did. Anyway, there is no heir to the throne, and so a conspiracy has to be formed because the kind of leading rulers of these districts that this kingdom is made up of are all kind of grabbing the power. They're assassinating anybody who could possibly come to the throne. They don't want a king. They don't want a ruler. But at the same time, like, invading nations are starting to come in because they sense weakness. And, you know, a divided kingdom is just going to shatter, and they're going to be left to pick up all the pieces. And so basically a captain of the Dragon Knights, a random guy, a quartermaster, and probably one of the best wizards I've ever read because he's just so ambiguous about being a wizard. They're like, can you do magic? Are wizards real? And he's just like, yeah. And they're like, cool, do some magic for me. He's like, nah. And they're like, but how can you prove you're a wizard? He's like, don't worry about it. He's one of my favorite wizards ever because he just doesn't care. It was fantastic. But basically, they form this conspiracy to secure somebody that they will accept to be kind of king or ruler of this kind of kingdom. And then they start kind of blackmailing and maneuvering. There's a lot of political stuff. There's some great battles. There's some Fey intervention going around over here. It's awesome if you have not checked this one out. The audio experience, narrated by Travis Baldry, is fantastic. And I can't wait to get my Kickstarter book because, this is going to be a series that I am just so invested into. We've then got To Speak with Elders, Book 2 of The Protectors of Patrani. And this is by Mike Mullman. Again, I was provided an audio copy for review by the author. Fantastic Druid fantasy. I gave this one 4 out of 5. And the reason I say fantastic is we really get to experience, because normally you can only do coming of age in one story. And here we've kind of done 2 different stages of coming of age, because we kind of deal with everything from Becoming a Druid, which is book 1. And now here we are at To Speak with Elders. And Grommy and Fiegel are kind of still out of water. The fish out of water. They've been thrust into positions that they are ill-equipped for. They are not really ready for these positions. Nevertheless, this is where they are. And then it's just full of demons, quests, griffins, centaurs, druids, kings, princesses, just all sorts of stuff. My big drawback was just the pacing. Like, it moved a little too fast at certain moments. But I think I've spoken with Mike, and he says in the 3rd book he thinks he's nailed that pacing. So if you like druidic fantasy where, like, you've got shapeshifters, you've got people really in tune with nature, but at the same time, like, they're not, scared to kind of give you a knock on the jaw if you step out of line, then this series is definitely for you. Alright, is that all my digital reads, or have I forgotten any? I just want to make sure I got them all. I've got Goodreads right over here to the side to make sure I don't forget anything. Alright, so let's talk about what I did read. And I read books 3 and 4 of Elric of Melniboné, The Weird and the White Wolf, and Sailors of the Past, I think is what it's called. Anyway, 3 was interesting. I didn't so much like part 1. I did like part 2, and then part 3 was kind of eh. And then I gave Weird and the White Wolf 1 star. And there's a specific reason for this. And that reason is what these books are, at their base value, is when Michael Moorcock was writing these stories, he wrote them as short stories and novellas, and then later they were kind of stitched together to make small books. And by small books, I mean around like 180 pages. And that doesn't always work super well. Like Elric and Winter, the first one, worked really well. The Pearl, which I believe is book 2, is trippy, but it still works really well as kind of a cohesive narrative. Weird and the White Wolf, which I gave 1 star, I rarely give out a 1-star review. Like, it is very rare to get me so irritated with a book that I give out 1 star. And basically, like, just the way things happened in this 4th entry, and we're going to be having a live show about this, I believe, mid-January, so I'm not going to give my full thoughts. It's just, these novellas shouldn't have been stitched together. If you were going to make this into a book, I would have rather they taken the elements from these short stories and novellas and then rewritten them into a cohesive narrative. Because, I mean, just within, I think, 120 pages, we've got 3 different love interests. The way female representation is handled is atrocious. Elric can't walk up to a woman without her trying to seduce him. He can be sitting there drinking by himself, and of course, a woman's going to walk up and try and seduce him. It's silly. And then the beginning is just very rushed. It's very frenetic. It just didn't feel cohesive. I did not enjoy that experience at all. I will be continuing the Elric series. I do have the 2nd bind-up on the way. But yeah, it is... Weird and the White Wolf kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm hoping that it gets better as the series goes on? There we go. We've got Winter's Heart up next. This is book number 9 in the Wheel of Time, and we are securely in the slog. I've been doing Wheel of Time on audio, which is Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. I remember this time through it, I think it actually gained a star for me. Now, I had it at 3 stars on Goodreads, because that was going purely off of memory. I hadn't read it in 3 years when I updated it to my Goodreads. This time through, I gave it 4 stars. And that is because it is not as bad as I remember. There are some great moments in Winter's Heart. It has an explosive ending, a really, really good ending. And then we get some kind of... It's frivolous information. It's stuff that could have easily been cut from the series. But at the same time, it wasn't as groan-worthy as I thought it was when I was in my mid-20s. Maybe I'm attributing that because I'm older now. Again, we're at book 9. If you haven't read this far into the Wheel of Time, I'm not going to spoil that for you. And then up next, we have got The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. And before we talk about that, this was my patron pick for the month. And I just want to give a huge thank you to my patrons, because lately I've been doing some fantastic channel upgrades to the channel that is fueled purely by you guys. I have just so much appreciation. Thank you for allowing me to constantly make these upgrades and updates to the channel. Thank you so much. Now, that said, back to Justice of Kings. And what I've got to say about Justice of Kings is this. It's a really good book, but I don't know if it was for me. Imagine, again, great coats, mixed with Law and Order, but with a teenage female protagonist who is being very much a teenager. And so that kind of like, I wanted to read from Conrad von Volt, this guy on the cover, but instead we are following, we're following him, but we're getting the POV or the perspective from his teenage scribe. And so that wasn't as enjoyable for me. Like, she wasn't terrible. It's not anything egregious. But, like, also, you've got to be in the mood for fantasy Law and Order. There is very much, like, investigations. There are some trials. There's things of that nature. There's really cool magic stuff in here. Like, the powers that Conrad von Volt has as a emperor. I think it's the Emperor's Justice, but, like, he's got the Emperor's voice. He can compel people to speak. He can commune with the dead, as long as they're recently dead. He can commune with them. Just some really, really cool stuff. He's an expert fencer. We get to see him, like, use his sword skills. Just really cool stuff. There's, of course, some conspiracy, things of that nature going on in this book. It was a solid read. But right now I'm sitting at a 3.5 out of 5. I don't know if I just wasn't in the mood while I was reading it. The first 50% was a lot of fun, but then I think I just lost steam. I think at that point I was starting to experience a slump. So that's kind of where we're at there. We've got a few more books to talk about. Next up, we've got another review copy. This is Blood Reunion Hybrid Helix Book 3 by JCM Byrne, cover by Chris McGrath. And once again, JCM Byrne has knocked it out of the park. And, I mean, this is like a 4.5 out of 5. I'm really, really enjoying constantly getting to get into Rowan's head. We kind of get to see some things here where he needs to do some soul searching. He needs to figure out who he is anymore, because he's changed so much across, like, his life that, like, I mean, he went from, like, a kind of upstart, cocky, like, crime fighter superhero on Earth to being conscripted into the military, to not liking what that did to him, to retiring, and he's just trying to live his life, but the galaxy is not letting that happen. He keeps getting pulled into these massive fights, all these political intrigues, and he just wants to tow spaceships into dock at his space station, Wistful. And we kind of get some great lore into this universe within this entry. Things are starting to be revealed. So, fantastic stuff here. I'm going to keep reading Hybrid Helix. As long as JCM Byrne keeps writing them, I am going to read them. Fantastic palate cleansers. Moving on next, we have got Nosferatu by Joe Hill. And I bought this one. Last year in preparation for Christmas, and then I couldn't fit it in, and so I missed it. And because it wasn't in December, I refused to read Joe Hill's Nosferatu. And I did a hybrid read on this one because the narrator is Kate Mulgrew, who voiced Captain Janeway from Star Trek Voyager, which I watched with my mom growing up, so I had to do the audiobook. She also narrates The Fireman, so I'm excited for that. But this is, it's interesting because I feel like, Joe Hill, who is the son of Stephen King, leans a little bit more into horror than, like, his dad does. Because his dad does more suspense, kind of creepy. And this was just, like, horror, thriller. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it. But at the same time, it was, at the time I was reading this, I think I was reading 2 stories with characters with falsely diagnosed schizophrenia. And so there was some sameness going on there. And then there's also some 2010s pop culture references. There's a lot of them in this story that I feel within 10 to 15 years are going to really start to date this book. Like, they're talking about, like, Lady Gaga and stuff like that. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, I had to look up when the book was written. I was like, Lady Gaga? Are we talking about the same Lady Gaga? Like, things of that nature. So, it was a good book. Really enjoyable read. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. Christmas Land. Take you on to Christmas Land. Kids are never sad in Christmas Land. Anyway, that's creepy. I then read David Gemmell's Drenai, book 6. And that's chronological. And I believe it's book 7. This is book 6 publication, book 7 chronological. And this one, I enjoyed it. The problem with Druss the Legend is I thought this was just going to be a snapshot into young Druss. This takes place from when he's like 17. It's only 300 pages to where he's like, I think 45, maybe early 50s. And that's a lot to pack into, 330 pages. That's a lot to pack in there. And each, like, there's 3 different books in here. 3 or 4 different books in here. And there's time jumps between them all. And the problem with this book, the only problem with it, is the main strokes of it are talked about in the legend. Like, he recaps his life, which was first publication, and I've been reading in publication order. So if you've read Legend and you remember that one page where he talks about his early life, where he's recounting his legend back to you, he kind of does a lot of the broad strokes. Now, if you want those fine details, then this is the book for you. This has all of those fine details. It was good. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Not my favorite Gemmell, but again, nothing terrible. So far, Gemmell has yet to, like, fully miss with me. Up next, we've got Andrew D. Meredith's The Bone Shroud. This is the Collation Saga book dose. And, guys, Andrew D. Meredith is a master storyteller. Like, I know I said that about Tiago Abdallah, but, I mean, he just sucks you into this world, and you're following these fantasy characters in their day-to-day lives. We also get higher stakes here, more battles. We get a peek behind that conspiracy that has been hinted throughout this series. Just some great stuff here in Bone Shroud. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. That is a half a star up from Deathless Beasts in the first book, and I just cannot wait for the third book, which I believe comes out this year. Speaking of my lovely patrons, we've kind of been making this shift into reading complete series, and right now we're currently reading Tied Child. This book gets mixed reviews here on BookTube. And I can understand why, but at the same time, it's just a wildly enjoyable story to me, because we take this crew who have been condemned to die in an interesting and heroic way. And then Lucky Maze grabs them by the just scruff of their necks and gets them shipshape. Literally forges them into a found family, into a functional ship, and just does some amazing, amazing things with them. I really enjoyed the progression of the story. It starts out really rough. The first 30 to 40% of this book, it's irritating. They're unlikable. They're whiny. They don't have any confidence in themselves. They have no honor. They are criminals. And then over time, like, you just see them slightly getting better and building up that confidence and fighting to change their society. And I just love the message in this book, because normally I'm not a thematic reader. I kind of got that in this book. And then we've got 3 other books to talk about. I'm currently, I was supposed to start this in January. I am starting it now. This is a wonderful gift by my good friend Theo the Rekindled Reader, the nicest man on BookTube. I mean, if you haven't subscribed to Theo, you should be subscribed to Theo the Rekindled Reader. He's a fantastic channel, but he sent this to me for Christmas because him and Alex from Tall Guy Reads were hosting a buddy read, and I've heard so many good things about Shogun that I just had to get in on that. So thank you, Theo. I couldn't resist. I had to start early. And then we've got 2 books. So there was a mod event in the Wizardly Do It Discord to get us to read a fan favorite, and they voted for me to read The Lies of Locke Lamora. I made it 25% in, and it could not hold my interest. I had to put it down. I was listening to this one on audio. It's narrated by Michael Page. Fantastic narration. I was really enjoying his Thief Taker, and the Thief Taker's only really in the prologue. What I deemed to be the prologue. And then a lot of people say they didn't like the younger storyline. That's where I really liked the storyline. I really loved watching Locke Lamora just constantly stick his foot in his mouth and get in trouble and do these tiny little cons that kind of blow up in his face. Like, it's really successful, but it's got, like, further reaching implications. But as we were doing, like, the further timeline, or the current timeline, I just wasn't as interested. So I put this one down. I'm not saying it's a DNF. I'm just saying not right now. I want to read this series, but for some reason, this is the second time I've tried to read The Lies of Locke Lamora. And I made it further this time, and I was enjoying myself, but I still wasn't pulled fully in. So one day I'll get the itch, and that day I'll have these on my shelf. I promise I'm going to read them. And then finally, we need to talk about The 11th Cycle. This is my review copy from Keon Ardoin. And guys, this book is fantastic. However, this book is dark. It is mature. It takes it further than Grimdark. There is just so many heavy themes in here that I had to kind of take a step back. These aren't my normal glasses. I've been dealing with massive headaches because these glasses are 5 years old. I brought my glasses Christmas morning, so that's kind of had me in a funk. And then on top of the themes and the ups and downs, like, this one was dark enough that it was actually starting to get to me. So if you love dark fantasy, this is absolutely for you. But there is a content warning page at the beginning of the book. There is self-harm. There is PTSD. There is just, there's emotional abuse. There is graphic death, graphic violence, graphic sex in this. There is everything that you could possibly think about in this book. It is dark. It is in your face, but it is very, very well executed. I've gotten a peek at the audiobook. It's fantastic. Trust me, if you like dark fantasy, I highly, highly recommend this. And that, I believe, is everything that I've read this month. I'm not here talking about my Indie Inc. or my SPSFC reads. Those are going. If that gives you any indication of how I'm feeling about them right now. That said, that's all I've really got for you. Please let me know in the comments down below how your reading month went. How were your holidays? What was your favorite reading? What was your favorite book? What was your favorite moment this month? Just let me know in the comments down below. And as always, till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.